And then the last one, named Harry Potter character.
Shall I start that? Hi, everyone. You're just waiting for us to will you stop talking about your favorite places in Alaska and get to the panel? That's my fault. I never shut up. I'm a voice actor. It's weird. They tell me they like my voice, and then that's all I need, and I'll just never stop. So hi, we're here to talk about how dubbing has changed.
It's changed.
Thank you for joining us. That's it. Bye. I guess we should.
Aw, shucks, keep it up.
It's the most applause I've gotten all day. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm J. Michael Tatum. I have been a voice actor, specializing in anime dubs now for about 12 years. And I've done all my work, primarily all my work in Dallas, Texas, which Funimation used to be the little studio that could with Dragon Ball Z, and now it's huge monster of a thing I love very much. And so yeah, we could talk a lot about the changes in that. And the lovely lady to my right.
I'm Greg Finley, doing voiceovers for years, many years. Did a series called Robotech back in 1981 and 82, which became a very big animated series. 83 was when it finally made the LA market, and it set the stage for all the wonderful things that we get to see now, all the great anime. I didn't stay in animation. Branched out, did a few animation projects, but mainly background voices in movies and television over the last 30 years. So probably around close to 3,000 movies and TV shows. But has it changed? Oh yeah, we will talk about that. Anyway, that's me.
Now someone just told me, just before we continue, someone just told me that speaking of background voices, that you were in Top Gun? Were you in Top Gun? Which is the theme.
No, but my voice was.
Well, I mean, that counts. That counts. Take what you can.
I did, I worked 3.5 days on Top Gun. And
that's kind of awesome.
It was, yeah. And it was the first time I got to work with Tony Scott, who was an amazing guy.
Yeah?
Yeah, sad that he passed the way he did. But it was a lot of fun, terrific movie. And it was one of the last times that Paramount ever did honest bookkeeping and actually paid the actors well.
What year was that?
That was 1982, 83. Wow. What was that about, 84?
82.
86. Okay.
It was the 80s, it was a long time ago. Most of you weren't born yet.
Yeah, when you're my age, it was years ago. It was a long time ago. Who was born before 1990? Raise your hand. Okay, who was born before 1985? Who was born before 1980?
Oh, we're losing them.
Born before 1910. No, I wasn't.
Wait, I had to do the math. No, yeah. Moisturizer, that's the secret. Moisturizer. So I guess we could take questions if you guys have questions to kind of lead us, or we could just sit here and tell you about our favorite vacation spots in Anchorage. So you have a question. Go for it.
Growing up in the 90s, a lot of
Wait, could you do that again, please? As a Southern boy, I just love hearing people do Southern voices.
Southern twang, I believe is the correct accent that I'm referring to. I was just wondering why Kumiko and Osaka-chan had to talk with this weird old accent. Why did they threaten to
adorable.
Oh my gosh! Tatum, don't.
What? I'm just saying, you just remind me it's like being at home and listening to my family just talk to each other over the dinner table.
I didn't read comment to me, they were talking.
If you want to take it as a comment, go right ahead. Bless your heart.
Excuse me, I gotta go out and milk the cow or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so what I heard, I'm sorry, your question was totally lost in my making fun of you. I'm such a jerk, I'm sorry. So you're saying like in some of the dubs in the 90s, correct me if I'm wrong, you said like you noticed that the Osaka accent typically was localized here in the States with a Southern dialect.
Like how did that, and then I know in like Yu Yu Hakusho, they gave one of the characters an Irish accent, and they were like, yes, this matches perfectly. So like how did they make those decisions to be like, well, this is kind of like an accent, so we'll just make it hard Southern accent?
I mean, I guess it depends. It's not like there's ever like a memo sent out to every studio that does this going, okay, from now on, Osaka accent has to be North Carolina. That's how it's localized, that's what the Japanese want. Like, it depends if where the character comes from and their relation to the larger story has anything, like if their accent, because to a Japanese ear, someone from Osaka speaks very different dialect and it's instantly recognizable. Whereas to someone who doesn't speak Japanese, we wouldn't always be able to tell it apart. My boyfriend speaks Japanese profoundly fluently, but he speaks it with an Osaka dialect because that's where he studied. And so he'll go to Tokyo and they're really like, oh, you have perfect Osaka. And he's like, oh, I thought this was just Japanese. So it's really funny, like unless you speak the language you can't always hear it, the same way that you can't always hear the difference between like say a Parisian French person and a Quebecois or a Belgian, you know, because to you it's all just like because you don't speak the language. I don't know why that happens to be. I think it's also kind of a city mouse, country mouse thing. I've noticed in any show where there is kind of like, oh, a person from the country comes and moves to you know the sort of epicenter of the cosmopolitan area of Tokyo. They're always like, it's funnier if they have what we in the States think of as, well, if you come from a rural community, you probably have a Southern accent. For some reason, that's an American thing. We think of rural people as having Southern accents, but that's not true. I mean, some people have rural accents if they come, you know, or Southern accents if they come from rural areas, but there's all sorts of rural accents. It's weird, I don't know, every country has its, like, hick accent.
And in the cases, or some cases, they will just go with the natural accent of the actor during the dubbing. In some cases, it'll be a completely made-up accent. I don't know how many of you actually have seen an episode of Robotech, the early one, especially Macross, but Captain Glovel, Captain Glovel's accent is like totally made up in my mind. A combination of Transylvanian, Russian, Scottish, you name it. That was what came out of the audition, and so they hired me, and that's what I had to do for all those episodes. But so it can be that too. So I don't really know the answer about the Southern drawl with that specific series, but sometimes it can just be the actors natural because they want him to continue that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good question, though. Wonderful question.
Yeah.
Wait 1 second, let me get your microphone.
We've got a mic coming to you so everyone can hear.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but your first show was Samurai 7, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and with you as Robotech, so how has the process of dubbing changed since your first show into now, and how have you adapted to all of the changes?
Look at that topical question.
I know.
Someone pays attention.
The old thing first, and then we'll talk, because I mean, your experience is like...
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so back in 1981, when they did the auditions for Robotech, it was an original idea. Carl Masick, the guy that produced it, who's no longer with us, but did an amazing job, took 3 separate Japanese series and put them all together into a total of 85 episodes, so that, with the idea in mind that they would syndicate it. So we totally, as actors, not a few of us, actually wrote did the translations. They had a storyline, and we had to make the lip flaps match the voices, and that's how that evolved then. I'm not really sure how it happens today, but back then we made it all up. That's all I can say.
Right, and that's so what's different now. So in the early days, in like the really early days of Robotech, Macross, and like things like Voltron and like even Silverhawks, like the stuff like I watched growing up. I can remember just as an audience, like for whom this stuff was geared towards, I wasn't aware that it came from Japan. I wasn't aware that it came from anywhere apart from just my television.
Masterful writing.
Right, I mean, for me, I was just a kid watching this going, oh my god, this is a really cool animated show. It's so much more mature than most of the animated fare I was used to. You know, I grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons. Who remembers those, right? Where you might get like the Smurfs, which is this cute little episode, beautiful, but very different in tone. It's very much geared towards children. In Japanese culture, animation has been across the board an acceptable form of entertainment for all ages, in all genres, for at least 80 years. I mean, it's been around for a long time, where for some reason in the States, or largely in the Western world, and it's changing somewhat, but it's largely been kids stuff. Like cartoons are what you see animated. You might occasionally see like an adult primetime show, but it's almost always a comedy. You don't see many American-made animated dramas or mysteries or sci-fi. They just don't happen very often. And when they do, they're clever experiments, but they usually don't go mainstream. But yeah, we just have different. The mainstream tastes in America are very different. But in Japan, so that they would have all this material and they would come over here and they would sometimes take several shows and put them together, you know, and be like, well, this will actually work, and we do this. So imagine being a kid growing up with, as far as animation was concerned, your frame of reference was like Looney Tunes and like Smurfs and like the Gummy Bears, you know, great stuff, and I treasure all of it. But then suddenly you watch like Star Blazers. And you're like, well, that's a very different tone. That's a very, like, the character, you can't just dip in anywhere. It's long form, you know, it's not episodic. You have to watch the whole thing or you don't grow with these characters or even know what the heck's going on from episode to episode. It's very different. So in some ways, and this is, I'm getting a little off topic here, but I'm going somewhere with this, maybe. Have faith, because I don't. Watching this anime and in this sort of first wave of popularity over here, as a kid watching it, it developed my taste for long form storytelling, and really made me see all the possibilities in it. So it developed my viewing habits, so to speak. When I first started voice acting, my very first thing was in 2005 at Samurai 7, and at the time, Funimation was still relatively small. It had about 3 studios going, and then like the top floor of this dingy bank building over in like North Richland Hills, which was a suburb of Dallas, right? I drive out there, and I mean, to me, I got asked to go do this stuff, and I was a working actor, so I was very happy to have the work. I'm cool, I'm gonna go get to do anime. I love anime. It would be great to dub it. Oh my god, the Dragon Ball Z people! Woo! You know, so I was a huge fan, and then here's Justin Cook, who, you know, was in it, and here's Chris Sabat, and all these people I know their voices from watching Dragon Ball, going, oh my god, they're directing me now. Oh my god, this is so distracting. But in the early days, it was kind of weird because we'd go two things. First of all, the way it was done in the booth, you'd go, and this is probably how it's been done for most. This has only changed very recently. You go in, your script, which, by the way, anyone here have any experience acting at all, like either on stage or on camera or something? Okay, so you know those things called scripts, right, that you usually get like months before, or weeks if you're lucky? When you're doing a dub, you don't, yeah, you see it moments before you start recording. So you develop very quickly this taste for kind of hitting the ground running. But we used to have like paper printouts. It's like the internet made of trees, kids. But we'd have these music stands, and we'd have like, you know, this old, like those televisions with the fat backs, remember those? That were in front of you. And it was like, you know, oh my god, this is great. I had this TV in my room as a kid. And you just match the flaps and they do it reel to reel, which is old reel to reel tape, which was great. It took a lot longer because you'd have to go and be like, oh, hang on, let's go back to the top of that tape, and all this. And it was really complicated and bulky and really intimidating. And then they went Pro Tools. Suddenly Pro Tools became, or Pro Logic became like the standard, and so now it was all done with computers. Now they have, rather than having paper scripts, it's all on a monitor that they can scroll in front of you and make notes and changes in real time as you're going, and on another monitor there's the animation, which they have much higher resolution. The biggest change, though, in terms of how we did it back in 2005, which is much the way it was being done in the 80s, It is, as opposed to how it's done now. Now there's this thing called simuldubbing, right, where it comes out here almost at the same time as its premieres in Japan. That started with Space Dandy. That was the first big show that, that's a huge change. I work as an adaptive writer as well, and when I'm handed a show, usually the show has already had a run, sometimes 6 months to a year or longer. So when the dub comes along, like the show's already been out, it's already had, you know, a kind of good run, and it's nothing wrong with waiting that long. Sometimes it just took that long to get the rights and to get everything, and especially if there's music involved and there's other artists that you have to make sure. It's just, there's a big legal process of acquisitions that's involved. But then suddenly someone had the idea of, hey, since we're trying to, I mean, Japan wants this stuff to be popular over here because it's a big market for them, and if they can get it over here, it makes more money. The artists are able to, you know, get fed, and everyone likes a fed artist because they just create more cool stuff. But now we do it almost at the same time, and we work much more closely with the Japanese than has ever happened before. Like, we'll sometimes be recording to animation before they're even done with it. We'll be recording to almost prelay grayscale stuff, which is the kind of stuff you usually see when you're in video game work. So it's much more traditional type prelay recording, or more akin to it, where the actors have to be on call, like you're going to be in this show, we don't know how many lines you're going to have next week, so be around, don't go to Anchorage. You know, and so it's really, I find it interesting because we work much more closely with the Japanese. And as a writer, it's interesting because whereas I used to have the entire show to watch and make decisions on, oh, okay, now I've seen the entire show, I get a sense of who these people are and the journey they're going to take, and you know, who ends up with who, and who the bad person is, who the villain is, who killed who. I don't have that when I'm going week to week, because the Japanese will be like, well, we don't know, we'll tell you when we get there. And I'm like, awesome, everyone strap in, it might be right. But it's fun. I find it as a creative type, I find the more limitations that are put on me, the more interesting, the more creative I have to kind of meet them, and I do really well in that kind of stew pot.
Back in at the beginning, back in the 80s, we got a storyline, because these, I guess, Macross and Southern Cross and the other, I mean, they had been out for a long time, but the producer, this Carl Mason guy, was a terrific guy. He had an idea about how he could blend them all three together. So all we got was like a story idea, where we had to have, where we were at the beginning of the script, where we were at the end, and as far as the dialogue, get to the end any way that you possibly can. I can remember sitting in the living room in front of 20-inch television, 21-inch television, with a VCR that took 15 seconds to literally go from play to stop to reverse, and you know, and all you're trying to do is make it make sense if you can, but even more important than that, make the labials, the B's, the P's, and the M's match. That's the big important thing. And so it's way different now. It's awesome.
It's so much faster now. Like,
we never saw anyone and we never saw anyone from Japan ever.
Oh, yeah, that was ours for the longest time. We might hear of them, you know, like years later. We'd be like, oh yeah, great job not screwing that up. But like, we were kind of isolated on our own. It's kind of crazy. But I think if somewhere down the line, I think someone in Japan realized what a market there was here, thanks to you guys and your enthusiasm. And that's another thing that's changed considerably is convention culture. And I'm sure you realize this. I can remember when I started doing the con circuit just several years ago, there might be 1 or 2 cons every weekend across the country. And now there are dozens, if not hundreds, every weekend all over the world. Like, I have traveled more in my life just going to cons than I have for any other job I've ever done. It's crazy, but it's awesome to see how much support. And so I think the Japanese creators got to know, wow, you Americans really like our stuff. Well, cool. I guess we should maybe work a little closer with those of you that are localizing it, so that, you know, because they now consider you part of the, I guess Japan now considers you part of the family and not just kind of an ancillary concern, which is kind of nice. I mean, that's going to change lives.
Very positive.
And on the concert too, we sometimes get to meet, now more than used to be the case, we get to meet our Japanese counterparts, and we get to meet the creator for a show that we worked on. A great example was Italia, right? Italia, I got to play Crazy France, and everyone knows the Snuggie story, I assume, if not, I'll recap. Like, I was basically, France is like a country, and very flamboyant. I don't know why they picked me. Well, you know, just a fluke, I guess. But one day I went in and recording the dub, and it was really funny, and the Japanese encouraged us, like, please take liberties, make it funny, because we want it to be funny for the audience here too, and it's really just be offensive, be hysterical, do what you have to. And we did. And I got to play this really offensive French accent, I just said one day I couldn't do it for some reason because I've been doing another accent all day. And I was like, oh, I've lost the accent. And I just saw this blue Snuggie that someone had left in there, and I ridiculously put it on just to be me. And I was like, oh, Zellities. And so they made me wear this stupid Snuggie every time after that. The director's like, get your Snuggie on, get your Snuggie on. We don't have time, get your Snuggie on. I told that story at an East Meets West panel in Baltimore when we were premiering like season 2, the season 2 dub, and the show's original Japanese creator and some of the cast members of the same were there with us, with their team of translators, and which was really awesome. That almost never used to happen, where like the Japanese would come over and you get to meet them, and be like, oh my God, thank you for giving us such an amazing show, and they'd be like, oh, and be like, they nodded, they liked it. I get so terribly nervous around the Japanese because I kind of put them on a pedestal. Well, the show's creator was listening to me tell the Snuggie story, and he just like kept waiting for the translator to catch up to the lag, and then he'd turn and look at me and be like, and then come back. Every few minutes, just he would look at me and size me up, and then giggle, and I'd be like, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but okay. 3 years later, more Italia comes down the wire, and I swear to God, there's a scene, like a blink and you miss it scene in season 4, where Franz is wearing a Snuggie, and I'm like, you did that for me! I mean, that's what I choose to believe, I don't know. But I mean, I feel like, and he's wearing a Snuggie with a heart on it. Right? I'm gonna take that as a compliment. Thank you, Japan.
Making me well up right now. That's great.
Oh, yes.
Did that answer the question, I hope? Good.
She asks the best questions, she really does. Oh, no, I know you have a question, yes.
Wait.
Oh yeah, sure. Save your voice. What's happening? He's like, that was smooth. He was just...
I would have projected it anyway, it's fine. But obviously there are a lot of people in the world who like, or in the country I guess, wherever, where they think about anime and they're like, oh, the magical item, oh no! That's stuff for kids, And there are people also who look at voiceover like, oh, that takes no effort. So I was wondering what...
There are also people that like blood sausage. I mean, people are idiots. What are you going to do, right?
And head cheese. And what are you talking about? Give me a break.
And I was curious if that sort of outside expectation or lack thereof, how does that affect your performance at all, if it even does?
Well, back in the olden days, didn't affect it at all because we had no idea what we were doing. It was brand new. But I'll say this, anyone that says anything negative about anime or the people that are so intensely in love with it, is crazy. It's just crazy because this is like a culture. It's amazing. It's positive. It's love. It's all these good and wonderful things. So it's been very good. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, professionally, I try not to let it affect you because let's face it, it doesn't matter what you do, what profession you're in. There's somebody out there that thinks
someone's gonna go
hates you for that. Like, there's someone there gonna hate what you do. Like, you can't get around it. Like the
Haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate. But I mean, honestly, for the longest time, when I first started doing voiceover work, I was really intensely concerned with, wow, this, I'm competing with Japanese. Like, I'm competing with perceptions. Like, so, because, I mean, I would come into it, in the early days for me, I would think to myself, my God, how do I not screw this up? Like, it added this extra layer, because whereas normally I would just take a role and be like, I'm just going to have fun with this and see what happens, and trust that the audience will be sensitive to what I'm trying to do, and that it will find the audience it's meant for, and that way I can just focus on acting and being an actor. And with anime, though, I was like, oh, this is unusual because you're trying to reach an audience that already has a profound relationship to the material, through the subtitle versions, or if they happen to speak Japanese. And I thought, God, how do I compete with that? How do you compete with someone's deeply personal impression that they've already had? How you're never going to be good enough. Just like reading a book, the movie's never going to measure up to what you've imagined, to what you yourself have projected onto that, that space created by the language barrier for a lot of people. And if you don't speak Japanese and you only see the subtitles, that leaves you a lot of room to involve yourself creatively in what you're hearing, so that the English dub is never going to measure up to that. And there's no way we could possibly know. And then I stopped and I thought about it for a while, because it used to really fill me with anxiety. I used to think, my God, like I can't function like this. I can't do the character justice because I'm too worried about what people think, basically. And then I realized, oh, I come from stage, and like, how many times as a stage actor do I get to originate a role? Like, what do you mean other people have played Hamlet? What? You know? So I guess that shadow is always there, and you just have to trust. Like, I've come to now like the added layer of feeling like I share the role with not only the other actors that played the role, but the audience, you know, because when they watch it, they tell themselves a story. I think I touched on this earlier in my other panel when someone was asking about like acting in general and how I feel like, you know, our job is to just be real in the moment and be true to how we feel, and if we are, you can sense it. You're an audience, and you are naturally attuned and drawn unconsciously to what's real. Whether we're talking about a space opera or a person whose like arm becomes a gun, like if the acting is real, if the person is being sincere, you know. And even if it doesn't sound like what you thought it should sound like, eventually, if you give it a shot, you'll be drawn in, and that almost always happens. Where, you know, people will be like, oh, my ears bleed, you sound nothing like the Japanese, you're a terrible actor. And then 3 episodes later, they're like, I love you. And they, you know, so you just have to give them a chance. There's always that, fans, and this is myself included, like, because I grew up watching Doctor Who, and God forbid if you were ever a new doctor, you know, like, how, you're not my doctor. You know, and we're all like cats when you change the furniture around. We've all had a cat, right? And your first instinct for like a week is to just pee on everything because you're mad that the couch is over there now. But then after a while, they sleep on the couch and they're fine. They made their peace with it. So fans have to go through a similar process, as do I. So it's part of the natural progression. I didn't mean to compare you all to cats pissing on furniture, by the way.
Oh, really? He did not mean that.
Did that answer your question? Awesome, thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Give it and you take it away. That'd be great.
All right.
You can speak loudly.
So I've heard that voice actors say that their job is looking forward. So what ratio of people in the industry often think is having work to looking forward?
What do you think?
Someone told me, like my agent tells me, it's like for every 100 auditions you might get 1 callback, and a callback's not even necessarily
that's
one.
not
That
a
just
job.
means you just got called back to a smaller audition pool.
You're in the
It depends. I mean, really, the thing about, and if anyone who has aspirations to being an actor of any kind, the one thing is, everyone who wants to be an actor, of course you're drawn to the artistry and the craft of it. That's the appeal, you know. But no one really looks at the business side of it, which is how to promote yourself, how to sort of beat the pavement, how to, you know, navigate the whole agency question, because that's changing now.
Or the union membership question.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something you have to look into, because it's about 70% of the actual job is figuring out how to do the job.
Exactly.
So yeah, but I mean, eventually you just build relationships. I mean, and get to the point where you audition for something and you may not win that audition, but maybe a year later that director or producer remembers you and goes, oh, you know what, let's get him or her in because they were that way. I mean, it's the ratio is not, I mean, if you were to look at it, you would never bet on it. If it were a horse race, you'd go home.
You certainly wouldn't go to the track. But I think most of the job as a voice artist, once you get on a roll, once you get a series, once you get involved with an ADR group or looping group or that is working regularly, and as long as your craft is honed enough so that you're a professional, to wait for anything, to wait for any opportunity, you just need to be patient. You have to be persistent. If you're thinking about it as a career, that remember that old saying, and I'd say this to everyone. Nothing takes the place of persistence, not education, not genius, not talent. Persistence and persistence alone is the key. So when I say luck is when preparation meets opportunity, if you prepare yourself and you stay in the game, eventually a door, any door, 1 door, 2 doors, success, stardom, whatever, it will open, but you have to be there for that to happen. And that's about persistence, and I think that's really key. I hope.
Speaking of change really quickly, before we move on to the next question, and just since the theme overall has changed, getting work as an actor now, the ability to get work has changed in this respect. The internet has made it possible. Some actor gave me great advice. You want to be an actor? Awesome. Make your own content. No one's paying you necessarily, but I mean, you can act, you can make your own stuff. That's new, that's a new thing. That's only cropped up in the past 10 years or so, where you really want to act and write. Do it, there's nothing stopping you, put it out there. You may not, make amends at first or whatever, because who knows where all that's going, but I mean, you can do it. Like, there's nothing keeping you from acting.
1080p is high def film, you can do whatever your heart desires.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome and terrifying in a way.
We have a red maple leaf.
Yes.
Oh, Canada. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What's your question, Ian?
My question was basically playing off the question 1 or 2 questions ago. On the flip side of how certain people kind of might feel like you don't compare to a Japanese voice actor, how do you feel about the people that might not necessarily be able to read at a comfortable rate to watch something with sub, and that's really the only way that they enjoy that medium is through your work? How does that make you feel?
Oh, we love them. I mean,
Proud, happy, thrilled.
I mean, I'll say this for subtitled versions. I mean, they can be wonderful and they're great, but for my money, I don't believe that the Japanese animators spend that much time and effort bringing this world to life so that you can spend 80% of your time reading digitized text at the bottom of the screen. So I think it creates more opportunities if an audience, and in my experience, the dub haters have always been around. They're not going anywhere. They exist. The same people that don't like, ice cream or puppies. They're like, you're such, of course you like puppies. That's just because it's popular. People just want to be mad at something. And of course, just like with anything, there are bad examples and good examples, but there's no reason dub acting can't be a kind of art form. There's no reason that adaptive writing or localization can't be an art form. There's no reason at all. Now, more than ever, because there's such an audience for it. There's so many of you out there that are willing to kind of suspend disbelief long enough to give actors and writers a chance to localize the material. What's great about that, and having met a number of Japanese actors and original creators now for our time on the con circuit, the Japanese love it when a successful localization happens and it is received well, because think about that. As an artist, you create something, and maybe it's in your native tongue because you speak English, you're going to write in English. Well, then suddenly you learn that, they love it in Japan, or they love it in France, or they love it in Spain, and you suddenly, it must fill you with so much pride to know that you created something that's content completely transcends the language barrier, that people and other artists can take it and localize it and give it a home. Like, you touched on something as an artist so universal that it can survive translation in a multitude of ways and contexts. That's art. That's what art is. And I feel that the more we do what we love, which is giving you this sort of stuff, the more you grow to appreciate it and the more you're sensitive to it. And it's, for example, why simuldub happens now, because people now expect to see a dub. They expect, even if they know the show, they want to watch the Japanese and they want to watch the subtitled version. I mean, because they want to see it. It's like going to see your favorite Shakespeare play every time it's in town, even though it's a completely different, fresh version of it. It's the same experience. It broadens your appreciation of the material, so you as an audience aren't always, for the rest of your life, chained only to your first impression. It can grow with you, and I love, as an adapter and as an actor, being part of that process, because that's why it means something. And it's created this entire culture. I mean, look at us now. We're having this culture. You tapped on this earlier, which I love. What we do is so much fun, guys. You have no idea.
Yeah,
it's so much fun.
Pretty cool, yeah.
But basically, the best part of it, and I think all of us feel this way, the best part of it is getting to come to these cons and see this wonderful community, this safe place. I mean, look how progressive cons are. Look, this is the first place I've ever gone where it was a con where I saw, a transgender bathroom. This is, I'm like, holy crap, it took Target 10 years to get to that. And but an anime con's been doing it for years. This is just I feel like this is at the cutting edge of acceptance and tolerance, and it's really wonderful. You've created this, whether you know it or not, you've created this. We've all been part of this weird little, this tide. So I love it. I don't even know what the question is anymore, but yes.
It's humanityism at its very best.
Yes.
And because you're all tied. We're all linked. We're all in this either as performers or admirers or fans or whatever. But we're all in this together, and it's really wonderful.
This is the best part about what we get to do, is getting to just be part of all this.
More questions?
Oh, yes.
Sailor Moon, no.
Whoever.
Either of you, it's fine.
We'll take both. We'll do you, and
both,
then we'll get to you next. Black first, and then we'll go to white.
That's racist.
It is? Sorry, we don't believe in racism at all.
So my question is, like, how is the expectation?
Easy for you to say, right?
So, how would you describe how the expectations of what a dub should be have changed? Like, telling a story versus, like, this has to be exactly the way that the Japanese version is.
Speaking as an adaptive writer who likes to talk about adaptive writing as much as possible. In fact, I'm doing a panel on it tomorrow. If you care to join me.
I will be there.
I feel threatened suddenly. I will be there, Mr. Tatum. I have questions. I'm sorry. I think the philosophy of the head writer of Funimation, John Bergmeyer, is a lovely man. I love his style. I love his art. I just love him as a person. His philosophy of adaptation is a subtitle version. You know, out there. A subtitle version is their job is to give you as closely as possible, you know, what's being said in the Japanese. Whereas the dub should give you a close approximation of the experience a native speaker would have. And sometimes the language, I want you to understand something, like those of you that don't speak more than one language, that don't speak Japanese, and I don't speak Japanese. I mean, I know enough to find a bathroom, maybe, in Tokyo, not in Osaka. But I mean, I know just enough, but I've studied it, and my partner's very fluent in it, and I know enough to know that, like, most people, when they think about translation, they think that here's this language, and here's what I'm translating it into, and there must be a very simple one-to-one ratio between every word and every utterance. That's not the case. I mean, something like French and English, two much more closely related, languages, much easier to do. Japanese and English could not be further apart if they were on different planets. I mean, you have to understand, these are two languages that developed and evolved over centuries in complete isolation from each other. Talking about simuldubbing, one of the things to kind of exemplify my point, I was working on a show called Laughing in the Clouds. It was the first simul-dub I ever adapted. And this wonderful show, one of the most beautiful titles I've ever, is Laughing in the Clouds, what a gorgeous name. There was this moment in the first episode, and when I'm writing the first episode, I have not seen the second episode yet because it hasn't come down the wire. We're waiting on Japan to finish it. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll see where this is going. And I was loving every moment of it. There was a moment where the character was talking about a sword. The sword was not shown on the screen. It was a reference to something that was going to come up later, and they said, "Oh, the sword." And it was an important plot point. It was like a family heirloom, and the sword meant something. Like this person was passing it on, or whatever. Well, in Japanese, and this is just another quirk of the Japanese language, there is no tense. There is nothing to distinguish between singular and plural. It has to be inferred from context. So if you just see sword, it may mean swords, but you don't know that unless you've seen episode 2. So in episode 2, it became evident, oh, there are 2 swords. Crap, we have to go back and get a pickup for that one line. Little things like that trip you up all the time, but those are just little surface concerns. There are things Japanese does that just amazing. Like another story I have about Japanese and how because we don't have this in English. There's something called keigo, which is it's a way. If anyone's ever tried to learn Japanese, it's a way of speaking that is super formal. Like we don't have the equivalent in English. It entails conjugating your verbs differently depending on your relationship to the person you're speaking to. I mean, can you imagine? Like, just appreciate that for a moment, where it's like somehow you say hello. If you just know the person, like, hey Becky, or hey Greg, hey whoever, But if I'm meeting him for the first time and he's my boss, that hello is now going to take 30 seconds because I have to conjugate and all this. So it's how hello becomes hello, sir, how are you, whatever. It's crazy. I was at a con with my partner and I had just learned this really cool, like hip, street way of saying thank you, which was azas. Okay, bear with me. Azaz is like a slang term. There's no equivalent in English, but it's basically the word, or the words arigato gozaimasu just gutted and the first and last sound smashed together so that arigato gozaimasu becomes azaz. And even saying it, you sound like azaz. You know, I mean, it's just super bro, whatever. You never say that to someone you had just met. I didn't know this. My partner introduces me to Dandy's voice actor, who's over there, like, being super cool in the green room, and, like, Brandon's just lighting him up because he's speaking to an American who speaks great Japanese, and he's asking him, "Are you from Osaka?" And and he kind of calls me over, and he's like, talk to them in your Japanese. I've taught you just enough to, like, to introduce myself in, like, super formal way. And so I said, in my best Japanese, 私は日本語が少しわかります。でも、また上手じゃありません。Which is a super, like, not super formal, but, like, polite way of saying, I have a little bit of Japanese, but I'm not very good at it yet. And then one of them turned to me, and in their best English said, wow, you sound really good. And I said, azaz. And the reaction I got was 3 of the interpreters go, Brandon goes, and I'm left there looking at Danny's voice actor who's just kind of like, what? And I gotta explain to me later that if I may use a curse word, it's the equivalent of being like, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether it is blown through the mind to suffer the swings and arrows of outrageous fortune or by posing in them, bitches! That's basically what I just said. So the entire weekend I would see these lovely Japanese actors and creators and they'd be like, Michael! Azaz! Became a thing, right? What were we talking about? No, okay, so when you're translating, when you're translating that, it's really hard to be true to what's exactly being said and to also convey the emotion. Because if you're like, well, there are certain things that just don't sound, there are turns of phrase, there are tropes, there are similes and metaphors that have a long history and that resonate instinctively with the Japanese speaker that just sound like non sequiturs to us. Because we like calling someone a radish, by the way. We don't have that here. Like in Japan, you would call someone a daikon, and the equivalent is to call them like a wooden actor or a ham actor, someone that's kind of overdoing it. But to call them, to make that, to be like, oh, you're such a radish, it makes no sense in English. It just becomes a non sequitur. And so now it may be a funny line, but it's now funny for a different reason. And it may not work with the plot and the context of the characters in this relationship. So an adapter would have to be like, well, we're just going to call them a ham actor, because that's what needs to be conveyed. The difference between what audience expect now is now they get it. I think all of you have kind of grown up watching both, going, oh, I see why they had to make that, because now you'll notice when you're watching a subtitled version, it's more intellectual, whereas when you're watching, a really good dub, you get drawn in as though it was written for you in English originally. And that's what a good dub aspires to be, and that's what's changed, is now the expectations. You guys are much more open to that. You're not immediately going, how are you gonna screw this up, Tatum? We were seen as interlopers. Like, the best we could do is just not make your ears bleed. But now you expect it to be art. And that's awesome, because we want to give it to you. So we have,
Cool. And we have another question right there.
I was wondering, where I know a lot more information about animes have coming from Japan a lot more in recent years, but back in the beginning, like, I heard from other voice actors that, like, they maybe in an audition just got like a line or two, and if they were lucky, a picture. Has that changed with the information growth of like the internet, just for the audition to be easier?
Tough one. I would say that it's way different now. It's totally different now. Back then it was there was no internet. There was, in a word, yes, it's very different now. Back then it was simple. You were assigned one thing, and if you were writing it and casting it, you would just bring in everybody that you knew. But now it's much communication. The internet, it's just totally different, completely different now.
Landscape of the whole process in a way. And that just happens. I mean, it happens in the art of any mainstream media. I mean, look at film. When it started, it was this tiny little thing. You can see it on, like, the penny arcades. and stage actors were very disparaging of film actors. Oh, if they could act, they'd be on stage.
And when you put them on film, you go, oh my God, that doesn't work at all. That's not real. It's exactly.
And it took silent film stars a long time to realize they didn't have to play the back row anymore because the camera was right up, on their
And
faces.
some of them couldn't work at all because their voices just didn't go in their faces back then.
So just watching that medium evolve, it's very similar now. I mean, the internet has changed things in ways that we're still, we won't understand for a while yet because it's just all happening so fast. The speed with which things change now is amazing. It's crazy. Like, we'll be, like right now as we're talking, like 8 things have changed forever. In real time.
There is a good part though, and it's so much better now. It's so much more, there's so much more reality in it. There's so much more team creation. It's just so much better now than it was then. What we did then was, wonderful, ageless, Macross and all those shows from back in the 80s still live, but wow, the stuff today is just, it's outrageously wonderful.
It's a cool time to be an anime fan, am I right?
Here.
It really is. It's been great for being a fan from the beginning of the first wave. It's also really nice to sit back and see how big it's gotten because it comes over in waves. The first wave was like Macross, Robotech, Voltron, and those shows, and then the second wave was stuff like Dragon Ball, and then the third wave was like Pokemon, and then suddenly floodgates open. And you get this, and it's kind of cool to see it because, especially when I was a kid, we didn't have con culture when I was a kid. You might the only cons were like Trek cons, Star Trek. And I'm not disparaging, but that was it. Like the con culture was not a thing, and so I was a kid kind of watching my stuff by myself, going, yeah, I'm the weird kid because I watch anime, or anime as we used to call it, or Japanimation was what we used to call it,
exactly.
Way back when we used to watch our anime on cave walls by torchlight.
Yeah, I was here for the very first another anime con, and I think there may have been, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people, 1,200 people here for the entire convention, and it was just an idea that Lisa had, and look what it's become in 10 years. And why? Because the whole thing, in the last 10 years, has exploded. And it's wonderful, it's positive, it's great, it's love, it's wonderful.
More anime comes over now because of its popularity, and with the more properties, the more product that comes over, the more people that don't think they're into anime will find something that speaks to them. They'll be like, because they think, oh, anime, they think of this, and they're like, oh, it's all mech, and I'm not into mech, and then they find like Oron, and they go, oh, this is not at all what I expected anime to be. It's because more comes over, and the more popular it gets, the more our tastes evolve to match where it's coming from, and so we get all the really cool stuff, and people that say they don't like anime just aren't watching it. They're just...
That's right,
Yeah.
It's truth.
I think we have time. Oh, we have time for one more, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, who wants to pick? Who wants to go? Oh, you? Yeah. Okay, here you go. Thank you.
I was actually wondering, do you think live action actors have any influence on animation actors? Because I know you and I have talked about Dean Martin, Paul Lynde, and I was wondering, do you think those actors have any influence on how dub voice actors perform?
I think actors steal from other actors all the time. When you grow up watching, most of us get into acting because we watched and were completely drawn to another actor's performance, and so yeah, I'd have to go all the time.
Yeah. It's as in anything, we grow as we experience, and we experience all these incredibly talented people in film now and stage doing these amazing, wonderful things. Who would ever think that Hamilton, if it had come out 15 years ago, would have been a big flop, in all honesty, because it was totally non-mainstream. If you produced Showboat today, it would flop because it wouldn't work with today's world. But because of all the communication, because of the internet, because of the amazing distribution of these films and these plays these days, I think we all draw on everything. Everything draws on itself and on the things around it. So animation actors drawing from film or stage actors, absolutely. I hope.
As we have to wrap it up, but thank you so much for coming.
This was cool. We appreciate you so much. Just know that.
Enjoy the rest of the con. Get out there and be amazing to each other like you always are.
Here, here.
Hope you guys enjoyed, and that's that.